You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. Take one of this episode. Never happened. Never happened. Scrub it from your mind. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do a show last Friday, as far as I'm concerned.
It's all right. At my age, I probably got dementia anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this Take Two. It's volume 28 of the best of bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. If you didn't catch last night's show, that was volume 28 of another miniseries. That's Tales from the Boom Room. Profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad with retired NYPD bomb squad detective Kevin Barry, who was also a volley out in Wantagh for many, many years. Kevin, of course, former emergency service cop, too. But he joined the show to talk about the 1996 crash of TWA Flight 800. So it was an interesting delve into that incident from his perspective. The bomb squad worked that case heavily. And as you can see with Kevin and a lot of the members of the bomb squad, 26 years later, that crash still bothers them, and it's easy to see why. So check that episode out if you haven't already. So now for this Take Two, we'll do the introduction again. If you missed it, well, then this is your Take One. And that's my next guest who enjoyed the Bronx Bend. You've heard that term on Getting Salty. Crooklyn, a.k.a. Brooklyn, and was also Queens Marine to match, although they do a lot of work out in Queens, as we'll discuss tonight. 27 years in the FDNY, and he was an engineman primarily for most of those years, particularly in the Bronx, and that would serve him well for the Special Operations Command. He's a charter member of SOC when it was formed in the summer of 1998, originally a member of Brooklyn Squad 252, responding to the many unique emergencies both within the immediate district of 252 and, of course, citywide as a SOC company. And after 7 years there, he'd spend another 7 years in another great company, Queens's Rescue 4, where he finished out as a lieutenant there. He was a lieutenant in 252 as well, but also did some time as a lieutenant in Rescue 4, as we'll discuss tonight. Finished out 2012, like I said, and that for this Take Two, volume 28, anew, of the best of the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, Mr. Cheeseman himself, Bob Chuisano. Bob, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Good to be here for the second roll of the dice with this one.
Yeah, and so far so good. No echo, no feedback, nothing. So we're doing good. I think switching the devices like we worked on off the air is going to help us tonight. So I do remember you telling me, and if I'm wrong, then correct me, please do. I think you grew up in Oceanside when I asked you where you grew up originally.
Right.
Okay. Childhood in Oceanside.
Right. Yeah, my whole life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Up until I went into the Navy. So for 18, we were there I was there for 15 years.
And in the Navy, I imagine, we were talking about the camaraderie in the Navy is very similar to the camaraderie in the firehouse. And going through that process, you were an older probie. I remember you telling me that had to be basically the fire academy compared to that. That was a walk in the park for you.
Yeah. Well, other guys have said this before. If you worked a real job before you got onto the fire department, all you got to do is show up, do your job, and and everything goes fine. A lot of guys are 21 when they come on. They're retiring when they're 42. I was 32 when I got on, and I retired in my 59. Yeah. It was a good rundown. No complaints.
Yeah. As we'll discuss tonight.
I would do it over again in a second. Except my hips will be killing me. Yeah, I would do it all over again.
I think back then the probie limit age, they changed it since then, but it used to be able to get on the job as late as 40. Is that correct?
When I came on, the age limit was you had to be before your 29th birthday, I believe, to take the test. Now, if you didn't get called for 6 years, you'd be like 35. That's all fair, But you could be past 29 to take the test. And there's a lot of guys that happened to, or they were in the military or whatever. They took the test when they were in the military, and then they got on. They're almost 40. A good friend of mine's brother. That's what happened with him. He was in the military, and he was close to 40 when he got on the job.
Shout out to our friends tonight watching the chat. Appreciate you guys being here again. Of course, if you have a question for Lieutenant Chuisano, please fire away. So tell me about your background in the martial arts. Of course, you're active in jiu-jitsu. You were active in boxing and wrestling. When did that start for you?
I started wrestling when I was 12 years old. And in high school. Wasn't a very good ball player. I could play football because I was kind of big at that time, but I couldn't catch, couldn't couldn't throw. Not good hand-eye coordination. Even though I played lacrosse, but I was a goon when I played lacrosse. I was a defenseman, and so it was just something I was really good at. Really good with my hands. And then when I went to the service, um, they catch you right in boot camp. All right, who wants to fight on Saturday? And so everybody else is going to peel potatoes and scrape the grinder, and you're at the gym getting ready for a fight on Saturday. So it was that was my first taste of boxing. My father was a boxer, but he never really wanted me to follow up with that. Then when I got out of the service, I boxed in the Golden Gloves. Did 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 all right. Broke my hand, and that ended my career. And my father was dead, so he seen what happened with guys that stayed in the game too long. They would get pugilistic dementia and all that crap, and he didn't want me walking on my heels. And then jiu-jitsu, I had a captain, Ronnie Spadafora, in Ladder 150, was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and we would, he started me on that road with it, and that was like a Japanese style jiu-jitsu, and then life gets in the way. You got to raise a family. It's kind of tough to spend money on that kind of stuff. Then when I retired, I started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and so I've been doing that ever since. It's great. I love it. It's I like the challenge. I like the struggle.
Of course. Of course. This is volume 28 of the Best of Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. Tonight's guest is retired SOC veteran, 27-year veteran, Bob Chuisano. He spent time in many different companies, as we'll discuss tonight, most notably Squad 252 as an original member and Rescue 4. The common theme with that, as we were talking about off the air, wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu, is discipline. And I imagine that discipline really helped you in your career throughout the fire service.
Oh, without a doubt. In any company that you're working in, you have to train. Sometimes the training gets, if you're going to a lot of fires, you're learning while you're doing it. And when I first came on in the Bronx, there was still plenty of work to go around. But even engine training, be the best engineman you can be. If you're working in the truck, be the best trucker you can be. If you're working in a squad or rescue, just be the best squad or rescue fireman that you can be. And that's just amount of training, and there's guys that train more than I do, guys that train less than I do. But it's the quality of training that goes with it, And that kind of after 9/11, there was a real lack of instructors, so I had an opportunity to teach at the rescue school, and that was a really, really, really good experience because I find that teaching helps you learn, because you're going through everything all over again in your head, and you don't want to give the people in your classroom the bad information. So it forces you to learn the base material better.
Of course. And that combined with the experience that you naturally get over time, if you pay attention to those experiences, what you did well in any job, what you maybe didn't do so well, ultimately leads you to become not necessarily, I don't want to go as far as say as a master instructor, but a very, very good one and one that people can trust.
Yeah, the guys that I worked with at the school, I had, I worked lead on a few of the programs, the trench and the rescue collapse, and the guys that would work with me were just as good or better than I was, and you just bring a different perspective into it, and so you think you're teaching a class and you're listening to the other instructor while it's his turn, and you're learning something new every day. In a way, I was lucky. I wasn't a very big student when I was in high school. As a matter of fact, I was a terrible student, which is the reason why I went into the Navy at 18 years old, because I didn't see another path, And if I stayed where I was going to, either be dead or in jail, So, that decision was pretty much made up for me when I was 18 years old. Yeah.
Getting on the job, you spent the first year in Engine 85, which is out in the Bronx. It's not around anymore, but it was out in the Bronx at the time. Were you, and this is where you can refresh my memory, because this I did forget, were you going to the same boxes as 82, or did you have somewhat of a geographical rivalry with them where you had to fight them for boxes?
With 92?
With 82?
No, they were right down the road. They were on the corner of 169 in Interville, and we were on the corner of 169 Boston Road. So we were situated in between 50 Engine and 19 and 82 and 31. But there was never a really, big, because the way it worked out was if you're first two, you're first two. Yeah.
Right.
That's all there was to it. And we went by box assignment, at that point.
No, of course. And one of the things is, and I remember talking about this with Jeff Cool, because Jeff Cool was a Truck 19 guy before he went to Rescue 3, spent his whole career in the Bronx, just how proud you guys were to be quote unquote ghetto firemen. And that's not a derogatory term. It's said with nothing but love, because these are some of the some of the poorest communities, especially and I felt this when I read Dennis Smith's report from Engine Company 82, not just in the city or even the state, but in the world. And yet, you guys coming from the outside to those communities, you never looked down on them. You were the happiest there to serve them, more so than you would if you were working on a fire station in the middle of Fifth Avenue.
Oh, without a doubt. When I got out of probie school, it was me, Charlie Flood, and Herbie Parmenter. We took our car and we drove to the firehouse, right after the graduation. And as we're driving through the South Bronx at the time, it's what Dresden looked like after we firebombed them during World War II. It was just acres and acres and acres of brick gardens, and I'm thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? And to go to a firehouse that was made out of metal, didn't have a pole, and it was like it was a strange. It wasn't what I expected, but it turned out to be one of the best times of my whole time in my career on the job, because everybody who worked there, they were all veterans of those war years that produced those brick gardens in the South Bronx. And so I learned a lot in 1 year there.
Right.
I worked with legends. These guys were absolutely. If you read that book, Report from Engine 82, he changed a lot of the names, but all of those guys were still working, and they were working in 85 Engine, which is now down the road from them.
Right. And I think what was nice about that is, okay, yeah, as a probie, either as a rookie cop or a rookie fireman, you do have to earn your stripes, more so as a fireman because you're living with these guys. With the police department, you do go home at the end of the tour for the most part. But with the fire department, obviously you're living there if you're doing a 24. Yeah, there comes a point in time where you get to speak. But once that's the case, and once you earn your stripes and prove yourself, these guys want you, even if they're gruff, even if they have a tough exterior, they want you to approach them. And for the most part, they want to help you learn.
Yeah. Yeah. At that time, a lot of there was a lot of, I'm not going to call it hazing, but, a lot of ball breaking. Yeah.
Right.
But I was kind of lucky. I was older by the time I got there. So I know the deal. Shut up and, learn your job. And they didn't really break my balls that much at all.
Right.
Compared to some other places that I've seen where they do it. They treated me with respect. Plus, my first time on the job, we went to a bunch of old hands in the third alarm. And I got my chance on it. That was my first time on the nozzle at an actual fire. So all you got to do is do your job.
Right.
A lot of vacants too. There was a lot of vacants around that time in the South Bronx. So if we were drilling or whatever, we'd go into the vacants and just drill in there. It's tough when you got an influx when you're used to working a certain way, and then there's an influx of these new guys. Us being the probies. You know, so a lot of these guys, you know, took it to heart and made sure we learned how to do the job the right way.
Did you guys do in your company? Because I remember hearing the story that not Joe Viggiano, my God, John Viggiano, that he would do this with his men in rescue too. They would take vacant cars too that nobody owned, just abandoned cars, and drill with those too. Were you guys doing that?
Oh yeah,
in the Bronx?
oh yeah, yeah. Because there was cars all over the place. Yeah. Well, I mean, at the time, I was driving a 1976 AMC Gremlin, ugliest car in the world, right? But it ran, you know. So I'm thinking, who's going to try to rob this thing? You know, sure enough, come out, battery's gone. You know, the seats are gone, and then you go pick up another battery. You know, and you would think you wrap this heavy chain around the hood, they'd get past it, they'd get your battery. So anytime we had those vacants, if there was still a good battery in there, we'd bring it back to the firehouse and, you know, charge them up for when that inevitability where someone would steal your battery. Yeah, they stole the seats out of my car.
That takes creativity, I must say. It's not right, but it takes creativity.
Out of my car. I had to go to the junkyard, you know, and home find a pair of AMC, you know, Gremlin seats or, you know, whatever it was. I drove home. I remember driving home with a piece of 2x4 holding a piece of plywood sitting on a milk crate. That's how I got home. And then the next day I went to the local junkyard and got seats. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So it was, you know, it was a game between us and them, you know.
Right. And they would, I mean, my God, and you'll talk about this. I mean, they were not easy. If you think, and it's not that sometimes, and this was something that was mentioned in the documentary Man Alive on Engine Company 82.
Right.
And in a black firefighter, I don't remember his name. I do know that one of his nieces was Maddie Lawrence, who's a friend of mine, who was a retired emergency service cop. But he was mentioning that they look at you and you would think they would give the police a hard time, and they did. But they look at firemen too as a symbol of authority, as part of the system, quote unquote. So
Right.
A lot of them living in these desperate and unfortunate circumstances, you wouldn't think, obviously you guys are always coming there to help them, nothing more, nothing less. You wouldn't think they'd target you, but they did, as you said. It was a constant game.
They were throwing bricks at the guys from the rooftop. As a matter of fact, you know, my car from 85 Engine got hit by, you know, they were riding, this is when they were riding the back step, got hit in the head with a brick and died, you know. And that's when they started putting the metal over the back step, and then they finally made guys riding in the jump seat, you know. So they stopped all kinds of back step riding, you know. The only time I ever had a chance to ride the back step was when we'd go do hydrants or a building inspection.
Mm.
You know, and even then, the chief pulled up behind you. You see, oh, you guys are riding the back step. You know, all right, get back in, get to the next hydrant, get back on the back step again. You know,
right? Airmail.
Yeah. It was a sad time, you know, for that kind of stuff. Yeah, you know, but one of the busiest 4th of Julys I've ever had was in 92 Engine, and I can't even tell you how many fires we went to. We were out all day and night, and the locals would take pieces of conduit. They would be up on the roof, and they'd use the conduit to aim the bottle rockets that they'd be firing at us from the rooftop. Yeah, it was like a scene from that movie, Clear and Present Danger. You know, they have the RPGs from the roof,
Yeah.
except these guys are shooting bottle rockets at us.
My God.
Now, allegedly, we might have shot a few back at them, but
Allegedly. I think the statute of limitations has expired, though. You're good on that.
Yeah, I think so. It's well over 20 years.
So you're good, you know. But again, as you said, it's funny. These stories you wouldn't hear anywhere else. But you guys, as you just said, at the time of your lives, there's nowhere else you'd rather work. And I think people that don't understand the fire service, if they're not buffs or never been in it, might look at guys like you saying these stories and think these guys are crazy.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, I think every firehouse has a front door. Usually change the tours in the afternoon, waiting for guys to come in. You'd be standing out there, maybe doing a little maintenance on a rig or whatever, and it's the greatest show on earth watching the locals go by. You know,
of course,
some really nice people, and some really crazy people. You
Yeah.
know,
Or both.
really, or both. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh man. And 92 was putting in work during that time because 82 had their peak and they were still very busy around the time in their own
Oh
right.
yeah, yeah.
92 was neck and neck with them during this era, though, that you were there.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. Well, I had a captain I worked with in 150 truck who lived in that area and was a fireman in 92 engine. His name was Jim McCarthy. Yeah, McCarthy. And he told me he was living up there back when 82 was really busy, back in the 60s. And but that side of the Bronx was still nice, you know. And he was working the 92 engine. 92 engine at that time was not that busy compared to what 82 and 31 were doing. And then things changed. They burnt down that part of the Bronx and they migrated over to the west side, over to the other side of the Grand Concourse. And things started heating up. Yeah, we were doing a lot of work. A lot of work. You do a lot of running too, a lot of ERS, no contact, but we were catching our share of work. And a lot of it was, 6-story H's, and multi wing. There was one building on Walton Avenue, 1259 Walton, 6 wings. It allegedly it was Babe Ruth had an apartment there when he played for the Yankees.
That would make sense.
And they were beautiful buildings, marble, entries when you walked in. You could tell like during the 20s and 30s that these were that's when the concourse was the concourse. It was a beautiful place to live, and now it's just crack dens. So you'd have to have an SOP. Okay, we have a fire in the the way it would work would be working from left to right, A, B, C, D, E, F. Yeah. Okay, if we have a fire in the F wing, where are we going to stretch into? Because otherwise, if you start in the middle main entrance, it could be a 20-line stretch. That's how long some of these buildings are. Yeah, and so if you're doing that kind of work up and down the stairs all the time, and there was buildings on the other side of the concourse up by High Bridge, where on one side of the street it was 10 stories, and if you went into a window on the first 2 or 3 windows, you'd end up falling down into the boiler room, and then you went up on the university side, and it was like a regular 6-story H type. Just a different. It was a different beast, and just like some really, interesting fires there. We had a fire on, I think it was University Avenue, and in those buildings they had in these H types, they had what they called sunken living rooms, and usually the sign of the sunken living room from the street was you'd have this big picture window, and we had a fire. 42 inch was first due. The window took off and created like a blowtorch out into the hallway, and so they got driven back. One of the members of 44 truck was still trapped inside the apartment, and luckily for him, the way the wind took the fire, came out the doorway, and then it followed the path of least resistance, which was down a 20-foot hallway into the main hallway. And he was able to have the foresight to get on his back, kick out the adjoining apartment wall, and he got into the adjoining apartment. Still got burnt pretty good, but that's where he was found. We thought he was dead. We ended up going with not, us and 42. We had our lines stretched and charged, and we ended up going side by side down the hallway just to push the fire back. And that was one of like the first examples of what I saw of like a wind-driven fire. It was really crazy. Thankfully the outcome was good. He spent a couple of weeks in the burn center. But it worked out. And I think he's still on the job. He's a chief. He's a chief now. Yeah,
Hmm.
sharp guy, sharp line.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, if you remember, that's kind of what I think that's what killed those three members in 1998 in Vandalia Avenue was the wind-driven fire there, if I'm not mistaken, in Brooklyn.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the guys, Joe Cavalieri, we were good friends, and
Hmm.
we had he had gotten promoted, and he was bouncing in the 15th, and he had the spot in 170. Yeah, that was and it's at 252. Um, ended up responding to that job. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wasn't working. Yeah, but it was that was a crazy job. Yeah, they went above and beyond to get those guys out of the public hallway down, down to the street. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I was it gets overshadowed because of what happened 3 years later, but that was really a terrible year for the FDNY and terrible year really for the city as a whole, for the NYPD as well, because I think between the PD and the FD, 9 first responders were killed in the line of duty that year. 3 cops were shot and killed in a 5-6 month span for the NYPD,
right,
um, including one of them in Brooklyn, and Tony Massimillo in the 6-7 precinct. And then for the FDNY, you lost those 3 members at Atlantic Avenue in June, and then
right.
Vandalia Avenue in December of 98, 6 months apart. So that's a really, like I said, it gets forgotten because of '01, but
Yeah,
98 was not a good year for either departments.
yeah. That was that one that fire on Atlantic Avenue was probably the worst up until that point. Was probably the worst fire I'd ever been to, in the sense of the chaos and everything that went along with it. You know, and I had just gotten to engine 252 because they weren't a squad yet. It was one of the I still had a 150 truck front piece on.
Mm.
I remember because there was a picture floating around. Excuse me. You know, but that was a bad fire. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that like it was yesterday. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's one
don't
of
know
those
if you.
things.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask you about it later, and I guess that answers one of the questions that we had in the chat. Because Mike Thomas, who's watching, says, "Hey Lou, did you work in 252 and they were just a single engine company?" And you just said that right before they became a squad. You did. So I will get to that fire, but I want to go back a second to '90, real quick before I get to engine 301, ladder 50, well, ladder 150 in those years. Did you go to Happy Land after the fact? I think you told me you went after the fact. Just to cover that real quick.
no, not happy. No, I didn't go to Happy Land.
Oh, okay,
No,
so that was somebody else that told me they went after the fact.
yeah,
That was another crazy fire in the Bronx. But you went to engine 301, ladder 150. This is in Queens. Like I was saying in the
right.
introduction, you're a Queens Marine, but don't get it twisted. Queens does put in a lot of work, and you know that from that standpoint. Of course, later on, as we'll talk about your years in Rescue 4. But here you are, you're doing so much work in the Bronx. It's such a great place to be if you want the action. Remember, it's not just the fires, the medical emergencies, unfortunately, the shootings and the stabbings and things like that. Were you burnt out? Is that why you wanted to go to Queens, or what
No,
was it?
no. It was well. I mean, the commute for me was horrible. To
Ah, okay.
be honest with you, yeah. The 1/4 of July, I went into work. Took me 4 hours to get to work. Yeah, just like inching along the Cross Bronx Expressway. But I had a kid, and my son Chris, he was 2 months premature, and he was going to need a couple of operations after that. And my wife and I just decided that it was best to move a little for me to move. I mean, I was passing a lot of the firehouses on the way to work in the Bronx. Uh, so my friend Danny was on the job, and he was working in that area. And I said, I don't know much about this area. Tell me, what do you think I should put in for? So I decided to go to 301 engine, and that was a culture shock for me, because it's in a residential area.
Right.
The firehouse itself is it's a nice neighborhood. I pull up in my pickup truck, and there's a guy mowing his lawn out in front of the firehouse. I'm going, what did I get myself into? You know, I think my
Where
friend
are the vacants?
I think Danny Fusco gave me bad information here. But then that night we caught a couple of good all hands. You know, and the good thing about that area of Queens was it's all private dwellings for the most part. except for taxpayers on the Jamaica and Hillside Avenue. But you'd go to work, put the fire out, pack up the hose, get back to the firehouse. Your meal is still hot, or at least warm on the table. So it was called the land of the 5-minute old hand. So we did our fair share of work there. I really enjoyed my time there. I spent 8 years in that firehouse. It's just it was just crazy. I see Mike Milner saying, "Imagine what the tolls are." And that's the other thing. Paying the tolls going across. Didn't have Easy Pass back then. You had to get tokens or paying quarters. So it was a good move. I mean, it was easy to get to for me. I lived in Suffolk now. I was living here back then, and it was a good good place to work. When I first started working in the engine, there was a guy. I didn't have a mutual partner in the engine. There was a guy in the truck, Richie West. God bless you, Richie. And he said, "You want to work mutuals with me in the truck?" So I said, "Yeah." So every 24, I'd work part of the 24 in the engine and work part of the 24 in the truck. And then eventually I put my paper in and I went across the floor to the truck. And I really like that. I like truck work. I love engine work. Having a knob at a job is the best position on the job. But there's 4 other guys on the back step or 3 other guys on the back step, and what's your chances of getting that nozzle? And then, but working in the truck, you get to do a little bit of everything. You're breaking down doors. You're doing your searches, and ventilating the windows, getting to the roof. A lot of responsibility. It's more for me. It was a really good fit because I come from a construction background. I'm good with tools, so it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working in the truck, and then I became a chauffeur. So I had that responsibility. Not the best chauffeur on the job by any means. Because I always had a hard time. All right, boss, where are we going? You had to give me.
It's hard. It's hard because you got to learn a new area.
I was lucky as a boss. I had great chauffeurs. Once I got there, I'll get I'll do my job. I'll get it up there. But I wasn't the best chauffeur, for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. It's like I said, it's not easy to drive that big rig through the streets of the city. That's where everything is so narrow as it is. But especially when you're going from one area to another, you knew the Bronx, you learned the Bronx. Now you got to learn Queens. And I have a running joke here with Joe Maliga, my man in the chat, and we always do this. If I have an emergency service cop on, or if I have a fireman on, he always asks this question. So it's our little thing, and he wants to know: did you ever deliver a baby?
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. All right.
I personally didn't deliver the baby because I was a lieutenant at the time. But when I was a lieutenant in Squad 252, we responded to an apartment, and it was an African woman, and she didn't speak English. They just escorted us into the apartment. She's sitting on the toilet bowl, and half of the baby is out. She was going to do this on her own. Somebody else in the apartment called the EMS, and she did she delivered the baby. We just guided her along, But yeah, the answer to that question is yes, we did deliver a baby. Yeah.
Into the toilet bowl, not onto the floor, miss.
Yeah. They didn't name him Baby Cheese either.
See, I'm glad I asked that question because that's Joe. Like I said, that's Joe and I's running joke, and there we go. Actually, that's in contendership for the highlight of the show. So that just might be the highlight of the show. We'll see. Yeah. There might be more highlights to come. We're talking about Bob Chuisano, retired FDNY lieutenant, volume 28. This is of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. Of course, distinguished career for Bob. He spent half of his career, just about half of his career, in the Special Operations Command. And I guess we can get into that because this is what I wanted to say. You brought up a good point with truck work. And this is not to say that rescue captains or SOC chiefs thumb their noses up at engine men. But I think they like truck guys especially because, as you said, they're doing a little bit of everything. And if they have that added background like you did in construction, hey, that's a perfect fit for SOC.
Yeah, but I knew rescue captains that would always make sure they'd always have a couple of enginemen um, who worked in the rescue. Ed Monahan in Rescue 4 was from 218 Engine.
Okay.
We had Don Bertucci from 50 Engine Rescue 4. You know, it's good. It's a good mix because, you know, you're going to have to, eventually you're going to have to make sure that line gets put
Of
into
course.
play, you know,
Right.
you know, and my feeling on it has always been, I can always, pretty much always take an engineman and teach him truck work and he'll do it effectively. It's not always the same way around. A lot of guys who spent their career in the truck don't always make good enginemen. But some of the best truckies I've ever seen came from the engine first. You
You
know,
have to start somewhere.
they appreciate those little things that that the truckie does. Yeah,
Hmm.
if the truckie doesn't vent and he doesn't take the roof, it's gonna be a tough push into that apartment. If the truck does their job, they get the roof, and the OV gets the window on the opposite side of the apartment as you're making that push in. Man, it's just like it's like magic. You know, it's just easy going. But if you don't have that ventilation, it's going to be a tough. It's going to be a tough go. Yeah,
Right.
you know, no place for the smoke to go, no place for the heat to go. You know, one of the times I got burnt real bad. I got burnt real bad just before we had bunker gear, right between my legs.
Swing and a miss. He struck him out.
That's right. But thank God for cotton underwear. You know, that that part of the junk didn't get burnt, but the inside of my legs did. You
Yeah,
know,
that ain't fun.
from
That
steam
is not.
because steam had no place to go. You
Right.
know, so where does it go? It goes up, and then it goes back down around. You know,
Yeah, not fun. And to Mike Thomas, before I continue, I see your question, Mike. I'm going to get to it a little bit later because I don't want to jump too far ahead, but it's a good question. I promise I'll get to it. And I mean, that's just it because I always bring this story up. It's one of my favorite stories. It was one that Timmy Brown was telling me right before he went to OEM. I think this is like one of his last jobs in Rescue 3 in '98. He was telling me that him and a guy from Squad 41 were on the roof one time, to your point about giving that smoke somewhere to go. Maydays were coming in on this particular job left and right. The second they cut the roof, Mayday stopped because that smoke had a place to go. And that job,
right,
within a few minutes after they started cutting the roof, it was over.
right. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like a big, but the roof position in the fire department is a really important. And the way I was always taught to do it is say you're in a brownstone or a tenement or whatever, is you start at the front and work your way to the back. Yeah, sounding as you go along, go by the skylight, take the skylight out, right, and then go to the rear, look over the back, see if there's anybody hanging at the window, come back, take the bulkhead door, and then complete your ventilation. And then you'd start making your way down for a surge off the roof. You know, so but it's like an orchestra. If we could put cameras on the first new companies, each one, and
Mhm.
then align it, you'd see that it's a ballet. You know,
Right.
uh, if the OV, the roof man, the forcible entry team, the boss, what he's doing at the same time, the engineman, how they're stretching the line, how they're bringing it up the stoop or into the building, and just watching this whole thing. You could put ballet music to it, and it would be beautiful. Yeah, when it's done right, you know.
Right.
And it's fortunate, all the companies I pretty much have ever worked around in Queens and in Brooklyn and the Bronx. Uh, they're all well trained. They all do their job. They're not out in the street doing this. You know, all right, just wake up and go home and do it all over again. You
Mm.
know,
Right. And when you are a fire officer, you are the maestro, you are the composer leading it along, knowing when to pitch the music upward, the work in this case upward, knowing when to lower it to a crawl when need be. And that comes with time and experience.
I had great officers to learn from. Starting from from when I got on the job. an 85 engine to a Squad 252. I think my biggest influence on how to be an officer was Steve Raswell. He was my captain in 252. He was the original, the founding captain of 252.
Okay.
He just calm, collected, no yelling. Just, okay, Bob, how we doing? Okay, let's move it in a little bit more.
Mm.
You know, I've seen him. He was my captain at the Atlantic Avenue fire. Just calm, cool, collected, and that goes from all the bosses that we had there at the time. Pete Martin and Eddie Metcalf. They were just all quiet, calm down. All right. If you heard them screaming, which they never did, then you knew that
It was serious.
I want to say the S word. The S hat was on, as we call it. But it just never happened. So he was my biggest influence on how to be as a boss, and I think I carried it on. As my 15 years as a lieutenant. So I think it was 15, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but great. You learn from good people, and you learn how to act it. You can tell a lot about a person how he conducts himself on the fire floor.
Let me just say, because you mentioned Ed Metcalf, I'm going to stream. Ed, will you come on the show? I've been trying to get Ed Metcalf on this show forever, man. And hopefully I can get him.
Well,
soon.
he took a position with the Port Authority.
Really? Oh, I didn't. I knew he started a new job. I didn't know that that was the job. Okay, well, good for Ed.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll
tell him I know Port Authority guys. Listen.
Yeah, but I don't know if guys would come on if they're still active. Active.
That's probably what it is.
You know what I mean?
All right. Yeah.
This day and age, social media,
true,
HR, all that stuff.
Yeah, got to be careful.
You got to be careful. Yeah. Me?
Man.
What are they going to do to me?
Right. That's the benefit of course, being retired. And somebody told me, Ed will never stay retired. That man, apparently, he never stops working. He's a workaholic. And I mean that lovingly. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, of course.
Some people, I have a cousin, my cousin Bill, who was he was a big influence on me in my early life. Plus, he was a volunteer fireman in Freeport on the island, which at the time was a busy volunteer fire department. I think
imagine
they're still pretty busy, but Hair a bunch of guys.
Bruce Newberry.
Yeah, right. Which he was good for, and he worked with all those guys. But he's still working. He's 80. I'm 69. He's 80, 81 years old, still working in the sheriff's department down in Georgia.
Good for him. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
My God. Hey, Bill, keep at it, man. That's awesome. Hey, let me ask you real quick before I get to the question. Actually, no, let me get to Mike Milner's question, and we'll talk about these guys a little bit more down the road. But Mike Milner wanted to know if you work with Tommy Cavakis, who was in 252. Sadly, he got killed on 9/11.
TK, Tommy Cavakis. As Tommy Burke pointed out to me at the Rock when they were starting up the squads, he pointed out Tommy Cavakis, and he said, "That guy's the best fireman on the job." And he was. He really was. Just a fireman's fireman. And one of those guys didn't care about medals, didn't care about anything else. Just wanted to go to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody, his obituary in the New York Times said that he was on his way to becoming a legend, but it sounds like from what you just said, he already was.
He already was a legend. Yeah. We used to call him Old Leatherpuss because he never wore his mask. Yeah. And he was always out in the sun. Yeah. But Tommy was a great guy. And he was a vegetarian. And I cooked a lot at the time at the firehouse. And he was like one of those few guys, he never asked for it. But when I cooked and he was working, I always either made him a vegetarian version of that meal, or I would just make it a whole nother portion for him. Like if we were having, say we were having hamburgers, just, then I would go get some portobello mushrooms and put some salt, garlic salt, and whatever, and grill it, and put some vegetarian cheese on it, and he'd be happy as a pig and crap. And every once in a while, he would try to shove a vegetarian meal down our throat. And we would just laugh at him. I said, "We're not eating that crap. Where's the beef at?" But Tommy's a great guy. Yeah, good fireman, good carpenter. Just that was a tough loss for the company.
I imagine.
Yeah.
When you got to 252 in '98, I mean, I remember Hank telling me that they just called him up and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this?" Because by that point he had 19 years on. You had 13 years on. I know the younger guys tried out. Did they do the same thing they did with Hank with you?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right.
Although I had Tommy Buck and I were friends, and we kind of talked about it. We said, you know what, just to be on the up and up, we're going to go down to these tryouts anyway. Just to, so it doesn't make it seem like but we had already known we were going there. Yeah.
We were talking a little bit about it off the air with 252. I mean, they were dangling some carrots in front of guys. You want to go to hazmat? Crickets, nothing. You want to go to 1075s? They were coming in like crazy.
I mean, that's basically the way it was. It was it's like ticket, the ticket to go to the golden ticket to go to Willy Wonka's place. And that's what it was. Yeah. Okay, you're gonna have to do hazmat, and that was the first school that they sent us to. Was hazmat. And then we started. And then it was introduction to the rescue stuff. It was like a 2-week course where they give you little snippets of everything. And then they started sending you to collapse, a high angle, all these other schools. Excuse me. And it took about a year, to get through all that training. And even then, the chiefs were reluctant to use us because, and I don't blame them. These guys, you got the Chiefs in the 3-7 knew the company as Engine 252, and now they're a squad and they're responding to all the fires. But our reputation became very good. But by the time 2000s came along, I say we were doing pretty good with that. We had proven ourselves.
I would agree. I will get to Atlantic Avenue in a second, but I remember like some of the guys, and it was particularly difficult when Engine 18 became Squad 18 because some of the guys who stayed there when it was an engine company and it was subsequently made a squad, they clashed a lot with the guys that were coming in as newbies into the squad. Did you guys keep a lot of the old crew from 252? Did they roll into the squad?
Pretty much the whole company.
Okay, well, good. And it wasn't contentious then.
No, there was 1 or 2 guys that had left on their own volition, but pretty much everybody. The captain had pulled everybody. They had a meeting, and but being at the time they were a 4-man engine, so their roster was a little bit lower than it would have been if it was a 5-man engine. So pretty much everybody that he brought in from the outside came from truck companies, except for Richie Meyer. But it's myself, Larry Tompkins, Pat Lyons, who else? I'm having a brain. But it was about 7 guys who came in. Hank Freed, 124. Yes, and so we were pretty much supplemented that the company is, and kind of got them up to speed on truck work. A lot of these guys already were great firemen. Good firemen. All right, this is what you're going to do now. You're going to take a Halligan and force a door. Yeah, no problem. Let's do it. So I think that was the difference between some of the other companies that became squad. A lot of guys left those other companies. And Captain Roswell, to his credit, pretty much told everybody that we're either in this together or we're out together. Yeah. So, and he had that quality to bring people together. You know. Yeah.
So I guess that does bring us to June 5th of 1998 and the first deadly fire of that year for the FDNY. So this is in Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. And one of the guys that was killed, as we'll talk about, was actually, and I read this in the last man out, handpicked by Chief Downey to go in the SOC right before it became SOC.
Right.
So you guys aren't a squad yet. You're still an engine. It's a month before. But nevertheless, you did go there. You worked it that night. So tell me about that fire from your vantage point.
Well, like I said, we were still on engine. And it was we had worked. I had worked that day tour, and I remember we had a what we called a fun fire because it was a shed in the backyard. You know, we were first due, and so we're laughing about it. You know, the new engines at the time had these electronic governors on it, and if I told you I knew how they worked, I'd be lying to you. But what it made it do, if air was sucked into the line, it would over rev, and then you'd have a surge, right? So a lot of companies hadn't gotten used to how these engines work. They got an SOP that if you hooked up to the hydrant first and then put it into pumps, it wasn't a problem. But if you were giving us booster water, which is what they did for us that day, and then you introduced the hydrant into it, it would suck air and overrev. And what happened was the length came off, hit a guy from 136, knocked him out clean. So we kind of thought that was funny. Fireman Juma. So we're back at the firehouse. It's around change of tour. And I remember the call comes in. Yeah, a heavy fire in this building on Atlantic Avenue. You could look directly south from the firehouse, see a large column of black smoke. The second alarm gets kicked in. Right, we're first due engine on the second alarm. We make it quick down to the fire building. We had to where, it seems like Atlantic Avenue was like a service road to the train tracks that went above Atlantic Avenue, and so we couldn't get onto Atlantic. We were parked on the side street. We pull up to the front of the fire building. Myself, Captain Rasweiler, Michael Rosa, Jack Donnelly, and Chief Galvin orders us on the line that was already snaked into the building. And we get in, and it was just pandemonium. It's, the line is not operating because those guys were trying to get these guys who fell from the second floor down. Some of the firemen were hanging from the floor joists. Guys were buried underneath each other. There was the probie was in the corner. He was conscious, and he's screaming because he's getting burnt up. 3 firemen are stacked on top of each other. So between myself and Michael Rosa, we're operating the line. We're shifting off, pulling people out of this pile. There was one fireman on top. I forget who it was. I'm not sure. I think it was Terry Quinn. And so we're trying to get him out. He's got all this debris. We're trying to knock the debris off of him. And another guy from 283, Joe Wydell, big guy, tremendous. He had hands like ham hocks, and we managed to get him out of the pile and pull him by the mask, and his bunker gear was starting to fall off. And I remember getting him out to the street, and guys are pointing out his bunker gear is off. What are you doing? And I look at these guys. I said, this guy's trapped in there. This fireman trapped. And then we went back trying to get the other guys. I think it was might have been Stackpole. I know Blackmore was the guy on the bottom. And I remember looking at the back. You could see the back of the building was falling off, and you could see almost like every once in a while the smoke would lift, and you could see the sky from there. We operated in there a long time, getting these guys out. Chief Kilduff was on the inside, and he was very supportive of us, and because he knew that we're not going to back out of the building. We're not leaving until we get everybody out. And I don't think the chiefs out in the street would even attempt to get us out. So it's like times like that. It's weird to say, but I had a certain amount of clarity and peace that comes over, and I'm just thinking to myself. I said, well, if I bite the bullet here, then oh well. At least I know my family be protected. I'm doing the right thing. I could never live with myself if I didn't do the right thing. But that was tough fire. That fire bothered me for a long time. Still does. Just happy to be here though. Unfortunately, 2 firemen died. A couple of firemen, their careers were stopped short. I know the lieutenant, the probie at the time, I believe he's now a lieutenant. Oh, he might be a captain by now, up in the Bronx. So he went on to have a good career,
Yeah. And that almost marked the end, and it's so sad because that almost marked the end of Timmy Stackpole's career. Timmy fought so hard to get back to the job, just to end up dying 3 years later. I think he was in the medical office too that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I remember. He at the time he was working. He was doing light duty in the medical office, and he was doing the mask fit, like checking the fit of the mask and stuff like that. They had a special machine that they would put it on to make sure you know how to get it fit right and all that stuff. Yeah. It's a shame. He was a good guy too.
Yeah.
Really. His brother also.
Yeah. They did a great piece on him back in 01, late 01. Charlie Gibson and Diane Sawyer for ABC News. It was really well done, and I'll try to put it up on YouTube, or not put it up on YouTube, but establish the link in the description later on Timmy. I will say, before I get to some of the other jobs from that early period. In that early period, before that day, 98 to 2000, when you were detailed to other companies, excluding the rescues, what was your favorite other squad to work in besides 252?
I'd have to say 41. Up in the Bronx. I really
Right.
That was a night. That was a really good firehouse, good squad, single company in there. Catching a lot of variety of works. Plus, it gave me a chance to go back to the Bronx. Both
Exactly.
as a fireman and as an officer. Working overtime there.
Right.
And they always treated me good there. Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of the different companies. 18 was a real nice place because it was just different. It was in a different part of the city. I covered there for I did a UFO spot there right before I got the spot in 252, and it was just a nice place, nice people. You seeing celebrities on the street and stuff like that. So if you worked in like bad areas of the city, and then all of a sudden you're put into like a real, people say hello, they bring by cakes, they do this, they do that, it's just different.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the city. Like anywhere you go in the 5 boroughs, like Ron Chiarava was telling me this, Ron Zoni was telling me this when he was on the show. You go to Staten Island, some guys will say, no, we got the best house. You go to Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx, different places, different flavor,
Right.
but that same, camaraderie and that same mentality for the most part.
That was part of the reason why when they closed that 85 engine, I mean, who knows? I might have stayed there for 30 years. Yeah. But then I went to 92 engine. and I saw that, well, the faces are different, but the guys are the same. Yeah. So making a move, some guys will spend 30, 40 years in one firehouse. God bless them. You know.
Right.
Me, I was in more than that. You know, the transition isn't that hard. Yeah. And you get
Right.
to see a little bit more of the city.
You had an interesting turf war there, and I say that just in terms of getting to the job because you said earlier, first two is the best two. Remember, you got Rescue 2 in Brooklyn. 4 and 5 will come over the bridges to some boxes in Brooklyn, and there's 3 emergency service trucks in Brooklyn: Truck 6, Truck 7, and Truck 8. And you're all
Right.
trying to get there before all those respective companies. So tell me about the battles, just trying to beat them to jobs.
I never really had a problem with the issue, except for one guy.
We'll leave him nameless.
Yeah, no names, no names. But he was, even like the guys he was a sergeant, yelling and screaming and stuff like that, and I just look at him as, all right, Meanwhile, my guys are already underneath the train. So what are you gonna do? Yeah. But
Real quick before you continue, I don't
there
mean
were
to, I
other
don't mean to
guys.
cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was before you continue. I just because it popped into my head because he was working in Brooklyn at the time. Did you cross paths with Jack Cambria at all?
I don't know the name.
Sergeant out of Truck 6. He later went on to the hostage negotiation team.
Yeah, I don't know the name.
No. All right. Nah, sorry, my apologies.
I'm
Go ahead.
great
What were you
with
saying?
faces, but names, no.
All right, no problem. I'll put them up on the screen momentarily. But as you were saying about the other guys, what were you saying?
Yeah, I mean, it is what everybody wants to do something. I mean, one of my chauffeurs in 4 had a lot of problems with ESU. Got arrested.
Oh boy.
Really?
More
than once.
My God.
So there was some animosity. Yeah.
I can understand. I think I can understand.
Well,
but
you know how ESU works, right? 2-man trucks, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
For the most part, right? The rescue comes. I got 6 guys, right? So if we're in a trench, what are you going to do? You don't have the equipment. You don't have the manpower. You got guys coming up from all over the city. I got any trench job in Queens or the Bronx. I got a rescue. I got a squad, and I got another rescue coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So and now that we have the SOC support trucks, now you have 18 guys, 20 guys who are trained up to a certain level. Plus we had all the equipment in one spot. We had the support vehicles, the collapse rescue with more equipment. Yeah.
It helps. I mean, but I will say you only saw that in Manhattan because I was going to say.
I want to preface this. I have a ton of respect for the emergency services, and as far as special weapons and tactics for the city, there's nobody better. Yeah, I just personally feel that they stretch it a little too thin with the other stuff.
Right.
I've seen where they did stuff that in my book would be sketchy, such as high angle work. We always work the safety line. They don't. Their dive team, they're not tethered. Our guys are tethered. But it's apples and oranges.
Right. To each their own.
That's not my decision to make. And I always found that I could. I could attract more bees with honey than with vinegar. So I just try to work with people.
And I will say, you saw this a lot in other boroughs. Really, the only borough you would see it in is Manhattan, where they would have problems during that era because Rescue 1 and obviously Truck 1. But I think there were jobs guys were telling me in Brooklyn from like 7 Truck and 8 Truck, and if any of the other engine companies or Squad 252 is there. If there was like a pin job, you guys be passing each other tools, back and forth just fine.
Yeah, like I said, it starts at the top. You know,
Mhm.
like I said, I had incidents in Queens with an ESU cop screaming, threatening to arrest my chauffeur, and but behind his back, these guys are going, yeah, like not again, yeah. So sometimes it's just one person,
Right.
and on the other stroke of the coin, there's firemen that like that too,
Yeah.
and their guys behind them are going, oh god, here we go,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just, yeah, personalities, a lot of things on this show, yeah.
Let me ask you from that era. This is a two-pronged question now that you bring it up. Oh, and this is Jack Camry. Let me show him before I ask the question. Maybe you might remember his face if you see him here. Gentleman Jack, as they call him, friend of mine. Let me just get a good. This guy. You ever cross paths with him on a job? Because he was in truck 6.
Nah,
Hmm.
nah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I was kind of say if you saw his face, maybe I might
But who
remember him. But
knows?
maybe.
I've been
Yeah. Who knows?
I've been out here for almost 10 years.
Right. Good man, Jack. He's been on the show previously. If you want to check out my episode with him, that was a few months back for Volume 1, the first edition of Talk to Me Life on the NYPD's hostage negotiation team. But anyway, just the two-pronged question is this. Can you recall from 98 to 2000 a particularly standout job in 252 that you still remember well to this day? And also, what's the best job you can recall working hand in hand with ESU, if anything?
Let's see. I think the most interesting job we had when I was in 252, and there was quite a few of them, was we had an arsonist going around in Bushwick, right? This is in, I'm going to say like 2000 or maybe 99. And he was hitting all over the place. So this one particular night, um, we started up the night with a warehouse fire. I had the roof, and it was in so I did my job, didn't get wet. Went then we started at a couple of other jobs. Going in, guys are working. I had the roof. I'm outside. I'm not getting wet. Um, and then we're pulling off a job off of Bushwick Avenue, and this guy rides by in a bicycle. He says, "Fireman, there's a fire down the road on Green Street." Sure enough, pull onto the street. It's blowing out the front door. It's a 4-story tenement frame, which means it's a frame building, but it's got apartments on both sides. Whereas a row frame would only have apartments on one side, so it was laid out like a tenement. The arsonist had poured gasoline from the top floor on the stairway all the way down. Larry Tompkins is the nozzle man, and for some reason, my boss that day, I'm not gonna, gave him the backup, which made no sense to me, right? Larry doing a great job putting the fire out, but he's wet from all these previous jobs, and the fire. The best way it's like if you start a barbecue with like the chunk charcoal, and that's what it was like on the floor. It was like it was just like a barbecue. Came up inside his legs, burnt him really good. Uh, so he has to leave. Right? Normally in that position, the backup man would take it. The backup man decided he wasn't from here. He was from like Staten Island or something, and he did the old toodaloo. So now I'm third man on the line. I got the line, and there's I don't think the control man outside, heard that I was by myself. So a guy from Rescue 2, Joe Jordan, comes up and says, okay, I got somebody backing me up now. So now with all the fire on the first and second floor is put out. It's time to go up, right? And the stairs are burnt to a crisp. And I'm looking at Joe, and he's looking at me. He says, "Are we going up there?" He says, "Yeah, I guess so." So we ended up walking on the sides, getting up to the third floor. We put most of that building out by ourselves. Yeah. So, nobody got killed. It was just that was a good engine fire. It wasn't a squad fire. It was an engine fire. Yeah. And that's one of those things I remember. Yeah. I think we even got a unit citation for that one.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good. Yeah.
It's always nice when they work out like that.
Yeah. I mean, and I had, I had some run-ins with the ESU, not run-ins, where like a trench job, something like that. We never had a problem. Yeah. If you got enough work to keep you guys busy, and but like I said, there were incidents I did, but personalities is everything.
Exactly. There's a great story I have.
You could have, being in special operations, you don't always get along with the other companies that are there because they think you're trying to steal your line, whatever.
Right.
So, personality is everything. Yeah. I always try to be nice to everybody until it's not time to be nice.
Until they give you a valid reason not to be nice. Because I was going to say, there's a great story that I got told and he'll be on the show next week. My buddy Paul Pericone, who's a Truck One guy, and eventually went out to the bomb squad to finish his career out there. He's going up this 1995, 96. He's going up the stairs on a building tenement in Manhattan because it's a stuck elevator. And he's calling down a Truck One. He's like, "Give me this, give me that, give me the other thing," because the elevator's cocked sideways. So then he hears somebody behind him calling for the same exact equipment from the Rescue One truck. He turns around and it's Paul Hassagen, and they both start laughing. They say, "I guess we're working this one together." And while I think Paul's on the rope working to get the elevator straightened up, Paul Hassagen's the one handing them the equipment. So, as long as you got good personalities there, which both those guys are real cool, level-headed guys.
Well, if you're running with these guys all the time,
right?
You know each other. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's
there's a healthy respect there after a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Just quickly, I know, obviously it was tough for SOC as a whole after that day in 01. I mean, you guys lost 6 guys, and for the Langone family, speaking of, it was particularly tough because obviously Pete in 252 and his brother Tom was an ESU cop in 10 truck in Queens. So they lost both of those fine gentlemen that day. And you have to rebuild. You're in a position where you're a fire officer by this point. Now you're taking new guys in. And with that said, then comes a film crew. This is early 03. Right before Metcalf is leaving, and you're still there. And like Mike Thomas, I'll get to your question in a moment. I didn't forget about it. There's a battle to potentially relocate the company. But just first on the film crew alone, so soon after that day, were you comfortable with it? What was it like having those guys around?
Yeah, they didn't bother me. But it seems like we never caught any work when they were around. If they would come and work like a 24 with us and then go to Rescue One and then they go someplace else. It seems like, as soon as they left, boom, they would go to work. But they were nice people. I mean, they really were. And I thought they did a good job conveying, what was going on. Yeah, and like you said, like they were trying to close down a bunch of firehouses at that time. And they thought it would be a good idea to put us into 44 engine and become a squad there. But we did a lot of work with the community board and the activists in the community. They didn't want us to leave. They wanted us there. Yeah, and that building, 252, was on the historical register.
That's a landmark.
Yeah, it's a landmark. They can't tear it down. They can't tear it down. They can't even change the facade of it. It has to stay that way.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, I remember during that time, there was a gentleman during one of those meetings mentioning that in regards of relocating, because this is when the terrorism alert was like at a code orange. So it was particularly high around this time. Remember, this is like right after. This is not even 2 years after that day. that, one of the gentlemen was saying, you guys are talking about putting it closer to Manhattan if there's another emergency. On that day, 252 is, I think, one of the first companies to get down there. It didn't take them a long time to get into the city.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's a hop, skip, and a jump, so to speak.
Right. So it made sense to keep them around. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't want to put all your eggs in one basket anyway.
Right.
If that's the case, if you're expecting another terrorist attack, why would you put everybody in at ground zero? You would keep them out. At least that's the way I think.
Yeah.
I'm no great tactician, but I wouldn't do it.
That's rocket science, basically, or it's not rocket science, I should say.
It's
common sense.
I also, in my heart, I think that they picked a company that they knew they weren't going to get. So, like, when they said, "Okay, we're not going to close this company down," people will look at them and say, "Oh, you guys did a great job keeping the company open," but they knew they were never going to close us down anyway. But they put us through hell.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
While they were filming you guys, and we've been talking for almost an hour and a half. I haven't even gotten to Rescue 4 yet. I'm going to get to Rescue 4 after this. But while they were filming you guys, you caught this job. Somebody told me, Kevin Jackson on Facebook, I got to give him credit for this. He was saying, Mike, pull this clip if you can find it. And I did find it, Kevin. And thank you if you watched this episode, because here it is. You're working this one. Great, great job on this rescue.
I got people hanging out the back window here. To the rear? All right. We need a 24-footer in the rear. 24-footer. We got kids on that floor. We got kids on the floor. All right. Rescue the battalion. We got 4 kids all together, still in there. Not counting the one I got out here. You got one out back, there should be 2 more. Right through the window, Bobby. Whatever you gotta do, bust it, whatever you gotta do. There's people trapped in the back. Squad 5252, battalion 37. You still have a report for somebody on the 2nd floor, the fire floor. The lady that came down the interior said there's 4 altogether. Yeah, she's right like that. The kid's one touch right up to the 411 floor to the other victim. Okay, you still have a report for somebody on the 2nd floor, the fire floor. Hey, guys. Don't lose it, guys. Don't lose it. The fucking lady there. Get hold on it. Hey, Tom, what do you need? Okay, baby. Hold on it now. Don't lose it, brother. Pull it. Pull the fucking room. 38215. Hey, Chief! We're gonna need oxygen! She's gonna need oxygen! You're gonna need EMTs! We got a total of 4 people that came out of the top floor. We had 2 1045s, 2 that were assisted down. She's hurt, buddy. Get it down. On the car! Guys, right on the car! That's a home run! Get some oxygen on her, brother. 38 hospital for Division 1-5. There's a 3-year-old in an ambulance down here. This is the car that was removed. How do you like that? Right there, we can take him on the phone.
They did the primary. We're going to do the secondary again. Yes.
1-5 does 3-8. Search is negative to Chris.
Tommy. Yeah. Ronnie, let's go.
All right. 37 ahead, 12. 176 go.
Yeah, all the victims from inside the building have been accounted.
It was a lot of chaos. They were saying there was people trapped. We heard that there was people trapped on the radio coming in, and I think they got out okay. I think actually they got everybody out, but I don't know if everyone's alive.
We're almost complete with the secondary.
It's a classic brownstone fire. They did it like clockwork. 214 stretched the line, 111 laddered the building. did a roof rope rescue, put portables in there. They do what they do all the time.
We got everything?
Do you remember if everyone survived in the end? Did you ever follow up on that?
I believe they did.
Awesome. What a great job you guys did there. That was a perfect job, as Tommy Burke said.
Yeah, but I mean, to give all credit where credit did. It was 111. They were up on the top floor. They're the ones that basically got those people out of there. And the reason why we were going to the rear, it was a brownstone, and there was no access to the rear. We went to the adjoining building, was because they were initiating a roof rope rescue in the rear, and so we brought the ladder in. And they managed to get the victim out off the ladder, if I remember correctly. Yeah, but there was like 6-7 people. I think they pulled out of that place. Yeah. Hey, that was one of those jobs that they were there. The film crew. That was like, oh, we got something.
Right. And they ended up being a pretty good job. They actually had a fire at a cookie shop too earlier in that same documentary that they were able to get also in that documentary, which is very good. I love it. And Metcalf, I can't quote the line word for word because there's some words in there that can't make the air here. But the part where he was saying you're on the payroll, but you ain't a brother, like that part, man.
It just so happens my nephew got on the job in that class, and he was in Eddie's. That was his probie class. Yeah. So now that's coming up on 20 years.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
And all those guys, they're the ones training the newbies coming in now.
Yeah, and now he's a fireman in Squad 252. So go figure.
Oh my God, it's true. That's true. And I guess we can get to Rescue 4 now, and that's where we'll finish out before we get to the rapid fire. 7 years there. And you got there, it's interesting when you got there. You'd already been in SOC itself 7 years. You're at 20 years. You could have went down to the pension section and put in your papers and called it a career after a very notable run. Or no, actually, but you didn't want to do that, and you, not only did you, and some guys, if they stay on, they pick a quieter place. Not only did you not pick a quieter place, you stayed in SOC, you went to a rescue.
Like I said, I like to stay busy.
Yeah.
It was when I got the call to go there, that was it. I'm done. Yeah, I thought about studying for captain and stuff like that, but that would mean if you get promoted, you go bouncing again, you're all over the place. And do I really want to do that? I said, because when I was a fireman, I had interviewed with the captain of 4, and I wasn't able to go there. There was no openings, so it was, I think Mikey Milner would tell you, and I had been detailed there quite a bit. And, so going there that was it. What a great spot. I knew all the guys there. They accepted me into the fold right away. And, and as usual, in my first night in all new firehouses, we caught a third alarm. Yeah. So it was really good. Yeah. Yeah. I loved working there. Great group of guys. But that almost got cut short too. Just after because when at the time you would go there what they called the onion skin, which is temporary order.
Okay.
Yeah. And I got on the order. Yeah. So I was assigned there, and then we went from medicals, and they caught me with diabetes. Yeah. So they immediately put me on light duty, and then I had to go through this whole. It was almost eight months of going to see the right doctor, getting the right treatment, which for me was going on insulin and an insulin pump, and then they had me doing light duty at the Rock, and so I took advantage of that, and I went to the gym every day. I was down to 185 pounds. I had a 4-pack. And, then I had to go through some legal things with, thank God for the American Diabetes Association. They got me the help I needed as far as legal work, and we had to sue the department for me to go back full duty. You know, and I know there was another officer on the job who pretty much went through the same thing, but before that, they would just put you out the pasture. Okay, you're done, and which is what they want to do with me. Just keep me on light duty until I decide to go. Well, if you know me, I'm not going out without a fight. So we fought it. Dr. Kelly at the medical office was really good. She supported me, and I got back full duty, and I stayed like that until I got out. Yeah, but the problem is they they don't want to deal with it, meaning the fire department. So it's easy for them to put you on light duty until you get so tired of light duty that you retire or leave. Yeah, and so a lot of guys hide it, and I get to this day I still get phone calls from guys who have just found out they're diabetic. They don't want the fire department to know, and I try to put them on the right direction. You got to take care of your health first, but at the same time, don't give them any more information than they need to know.
Right. Because unfortunately, in with today, too much transparency, telling the truth can unfortunately, in that regard, hurt you. Not that you're saying it's good to lie. Tell them, yeah, because you got to look after your own health, but tell them only the essentials.
Well, yeah, I've always learned if a person in authority, i.e., police officer or chief of the department, asks you a question, they already know the answer.
Yeah, usually lawyers, same thing.
Yeah, they already know the answer. So, so that being done, I went back full duty, and I finished out my career in Rescue 4. Yeah, and that was a great time for me. Great firemen that I worked with there. Some legends, I think. And great, and they took care of me. Anytime the chief would say, "Hey, nice job, Rescue 4," I said, "Well, thank those guys because they're the ones that did it." And managed to get. We were involved in a couple of really for me historic fires. When I was there.
If you want to tell me about them, that'd be good.
Well, I think the first one that comes to mind is we had a fire. We were coming back from another job, and we're on Queens Boulevard, and we get a call for Gorsland Street, which is more over towards where 288 is, and so ladder 126 acting to 136 and 287 are first to do it at this fire, and it was in a one-story in the front garden apartment, I guess you call it, and then but it was 2 stories in the back, and it turns out this whoever saw this fire, they didn't do it on purpose. They were burning, or they were taking out a boiler in the basement, and there was a fireplace in the basement, and they lit up these oily rags in the fireplace or got out of the fireplace and got into the ceiling of the basement. And by the time we got there was no secondary truck there. The place was rolling. It sounded like a freight train. Heavy black smoke coming out the front door, just chugging. And that was from the time I got off the rig at the corner and walked, 150 feet, light smoke to rolling, like a freight train. So the thermal imaging kind of couldn't see anything. Yeah, I was holding it up to my face like this. Couldn't see nothing. That's how thick the smoke was. My irons man was inside. It had burnt through the door already. A couple of guys from 126 are in the basement. One gets out, and then the stairs burnt out away. The officer went to the rear of the building, found refuge there. My irons man took a door off an adjoining room, pushed it over the opening, and then the engine gets burnt. They're making their way out. So they push me out of the doorway. I look into a side window. I see a hand hanging out the window, and turns out it was the boss from 287. He got turned around. We managed to get him out, and his hands were completely burnt, just really bad, you know. And then that was one of those one fires where it had not been for the guys doing what they did, meaning the roof man was on the roof. He knew the shit was on. Excuse my language. Cut a hole right over where the stairs were for the basement. So now all the smoke lifts up. We ended up going in. The stairs are burnt out. We ended up going in through the back door with another engine. Found the lieutenant there and put the fire out. Yeah, and the lieutenant from 287. He survived. Never went back to work, but he survived. That was a good thing. That was one of those times where they had the chief wanted to write me up, and I got the phone call from the lieutenant thanking me, and that was better than getting a medal, as far as I was concerned.
I'll say.
Knowing that you did your job, you got the guy out. Everybody went home after that one. That's a good fire, and everybody goes home.
Absolutely. I have a question here from Angela Ang, retired 13th Precinct cop. Actually, that's where one truck is, 13th Precinct. And she wants to know, when the cars are parked one lane out because of the bike lane, is the spot adjacent to the hydrant still considered blocking the hydrant? It's a good one.
That is a good one. The question is, do I have access to the hydrant?
Okay. As long as you do, then it's not a blockage.
Yeah, I mean, I think any engine chauffeur would prefer that you don't park right opposite the hydrant. Yeah, but as long as he's got access, I mean, you may have a supply line draped across your car.
Or through your window.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've done that,
Yeah.
But
and the public never gets mad at you guys for doing that too. I mean, the car owner does, but you know what? It's his fault or her fault.
I mean, what are you going to do?
Right.
The important thing is you got to get water.
Exactly.
So how you get? I mean, look, I understand living in the city, and I know parking sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you going to do? You got to get water. You're always thinking, well, they're never going to get a fire when I'm parked on this hydrant. Next thing you know, you come out and you got a 3.5-inch line poking through your windows.
Yeah. Swing and a miss. He struck him out.
Yeah, it's it is what it is.
Yeah.
Thank God hopefully you got insurance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's quite the explanation to the insurance company. So how did your windows break, sir? The fire department.
The fire department. Blame it on them. Contact them. I'm sure they'll own up to it.
Oh God. Well, allegedly. The last thing I'll ask you about before the rapid fire, that last year before you called it a day in 2012, you went out with a lot of work because there was Irene in 11, but Sandy was the big one. And Queens, of all the 5 boroughs, Queens got hit the hardest. Were you working the night that the hurricane touched down?
No,
Okay.
I wasn't. No, I was working for the tornado that tore through parts of Queens and Brooklyn. I don't know if you remember that.
When was this?
It was 2010, I think. Pretty sure 2010, 2009. We had a tornado that came through parts of the city, and it was crazy. We were going to a bariatric lift on Woodhaven Boulevard. We were going down to Ozone Park. There was and we ended up. My chauffeur was was Billy Murphy. He's the captain of Rescue 3 now. We had to pull over to the side of the road because we're in the eye of the storm. This tornado came through, and we had to pull over because we couldn't see anything. You know, trees are flying all over the place. We get down. It eases up. We get down to where the bariatric lift was. Guy was like 900 pounds. We had to set up a tripod around him, get a cargo net underneath him, and then load him onto a special gurney. Had the only one guy could get into the elevator with him and get him out. Now, this tornado already passed through Queens. We couldn't get dispatch on the radio. Couldn't get dispatch on the phone. The MDT is down. What do we do? You know, took us like 2 hours to get back to the firehouse. Back into the firehouse, closed the doors, and said they'll call us if they need us. You know, and later on we went to a couple of minor collapses. Afterwards, but we had no way of getting through to dispatch. So we just listened to the radio. It sounded like something but you could. There's cars on every major street. There's trees down all over the place. There's electrical lines down. It was pandemonium. Yeah, they spent days cleaning up after that mess, which it wasn't a hurricane, but it was a tornado. Yeah, if you look it up on YouTube and just type in tornado videos in Queens, there was a guy in one of those high rises out in Eastern Queens who videotaped it, and from a distance you can see it better.
I'll have to find it, and I guarantee you that guy that you had to lift, he didn't live on the first floor.
No,
they never live on the first floor. Never.
No.
Why would he?
If they do, the doorway's not big enough to get the guy out.
Exactly. God, there's a clip too, and I see your question, Eugene. I'm going to get to that one momentarily. It's like May of 2001, Rescue 2, and the driver in that clip is I think it's Danny Libretti. It's either Danny Libretti or Billy Lake. Poor guy. Those guys. Neither of those guys made it out on 9/11. But it's a lift on a 600-pound man, and I feel bad because the wife's in there. She's saying, "Yeah, this happened last year." His grandson's eating ice cream, and I don't mean to laugh, but the narrator was making it hilarious because as they were wheeling him out, he says in the dead serious voice, "And the gurneys collapsed." And then later on, despite their best efforts, the patient was pronounced dead. And I'm sitting here, not because I'm happy the guy died, but I'm like, he just has to narrate it that way.
We had a guy up on during like a really bad snowstorm. Really bad, of course.
Of course, exactly. Why not?
Really bad snowstorm. Get a call. Guys up on the 3rd floor. Just like a referee. 3, right? 3rd floor. We have to get him down. Same thing. Cargo net. Right? Guy had to go up through ladder, put a couple of 4x4s across an opening for an anchor, and then get the guy lifted up, and then going down the stairway, and like somebody's got to be with him to walk him down the stairway the whole time. Got him into the ambulance, and then the ambulance, for some reason, they were able to get out of that street. We weren't. We had to, even with chains on, we couldn't get off the street, so we had to use the winch, hook it up to a telephone pole, put ourselves 20 feet, okay, and then unhook the winch, put on something else, till we finally got to the intersection, which was plowed, and get off the street. It was just a comedy of errors. For that.
Fun times.
Yeah.
Fun times. And the question for Eugene, thanks Eugene for tuning in. Hello to you too. Is did you ever cross paths with Kevin O'Rourke, who was in Rescue 2?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
what a nice man.
Yeah, it's just really always had a smile on his face.
Mm-hmm.
and never had a bad word to say.
No.
I don't even think I ever heard Kevin curse.
No. The last man out, they said it was funny. The worst thing that the guys in Rescue 2, and for those of you who don't know, Kevin, unfortunately, is another one who got killed on 9/11. The worst thing the guys in Rescue 2 ever heard him say, he called somebody a poopy head. That was it. That was the worst he would go.
Right. Yeah, because, we'd be at a lot of the same jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You'd
Right.
see it. Always a smile, just doing his job. Yeah. And, some people are just like that. Yeah. I mean, I remember the captain of Rescue to Phil
Ruvlo. Yeah.
Phil Ruvalo. We'd be crawling down the same hallway. He'd look at me and like, are we having fun yet? Yeah, that's what he would say to you. Are we having fun yet? Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, after 9/11, he never said that to me anymore.
Yeah. And I understand it, and I think he said as well, that documentary Still Riding, the job will be fun again. At the time, he was still working, of course, but it'll never be as much, at least not for me. Those were his exact words.
Right.
And I don't blame him.
I think that was the same for a lot of us, too. That really dealing with that. We lost all 6 guys on 9/11, dealing with the families.
Mm-hmm.
And me, I stayed down at the site until, even way past when they closed down the site, because they had forgotten to do a thorough search of the Deutsche Bank building. So I got asked to go down there with Captain Rassfather again, and Richie Sweeney and Mike Banker, and we did like a month-long blitz with that building. I almost had a break from reality. I just I wanted it to be over.
Right.
And Richie Sweeney would tell you that I ran through a couple of walls after doing that. The other thing is that, what about all the civilians?
Right.
All those people that do down at the site serving us dinner, the logistics, all that other crap. People forget that there's civilians, volunteers out there that are dying, but they don't get the recognition that the firemen and cops do. I mean, I know one of the girls, Susan, who she lost her husband. From it. They were both volunteers down at the site. And nobody really talks about that. And they made our lives so much easier down there. You'd work a shift down at the pile, and then you'd go back there to cafeteria tent. You'd go there, you'd have something to eat. It was always hot food. Somebody nice, somebody just say a kind word to, because it was really, it drained on me. It really did. So I'm just putting it out there.
No, you should. And it's a good thing. It reminds me, not to cut you off, I apologize. The column that my friend Amanda Farinacci wrote. She used to be a reporter for New York One. She was down there a long time. She's now the fire department's press secretary. Right. And she just got breast cancer. She beat it. She thankfully underwent treatment. She's cancer free. But she was saying it doesn't matter what capacity you were down there in her case, covering it as a reporter, get yourself checked.
Right. A lot of people don't know that it's out there, that the help is available for them.
Yep.
They say, how are we gonna, and I'm not the right person to bring that to the forefront. But I personally feel that, it's great that the public thinks about us and we're getting the care that we need. And that, thanks to the guys, activists, Ray Pfeiffer and, John Stewart, all those guys went to bat for us when nobody else was. But it's also you got the civilians that were involved down there, and now they're starting to get sick. And I think that's something that that should be brought up about that. For me, I was very thankful for them. Down there, they made my life a lot easier. And like I said, I spent a lot of days down there.
Thanks for putting that out there. I'm so glad we got the chance to do the redo. This has been awesome. And Joe Malika says, this volume 28 would be any attempted volume 28, just saying. And he's right. Thankfully, we were able to get the text
I'm
straight.
sorry, I didn't get a haircut today, though.
Nah, it doesn't matter. Neither did I. Who cares? Anyway, let's end with the rapid fire. It's 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run questions, 5 hit and run answers, I should say, from you. You can say pass if you want. You ready? All right, here we go. First, when you look back on your career, what are you proudest of?
Proudest moment. Saving that 5.
There you go. All right. And that's why I say you could say pass. Second is funniest call you ever responded to.
Funniest call you ever responded to. Pass.
That makes sense. That's fair. Third, I guess, well, besides rescuing the fireman, most uplifting job you ever responded to, besides that one?
I'd have to say, and it was a fatal fire, but we had a fire on Walton Avenue in the Bronx, and watching my guys doing what they do best. I mean, to the point of exhaustion. Yeah, I was never prouder to be an officer in rescue force after that fire, even though it was a fatal fire. Yeah, I still get tears in my eyes when I think about it. It's great. Yeah, giants among men.
Mm-hmm. Ordinary Heroes, the show Pfeiffer titled his appropriate memoir. Fourth, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
Restaurant, I'm going to go with Italy in that Lower Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my friend Tommy turned me on to it. And when I was out in Vegas, we had dinner there. Another one, which is just as good, is because the woman who owns it is, she's a famous chef, and so it's an Italian emporium. If you want to just have cold cuts, you have cold cuts. You want to have a steak, you have a steak. You can go there with 5 people. Everybody goes in different directions and end up in the same table and have something different, but you're having a great meal. So yeah, that place right there. Yeah, and the Farry's pizza. I'm sure Bobby DeLeon can tell you about that. It's still the best pizza I've ever tasted in my life.
I gotta go with Bobby, preferably. Fifth and finally, knowing what you know now, if you can go back in time, give advice to a younger version of yourself, what would you tell young Bob Chuisano?
I wouldn't tell him to do anything different.
Makes sense, right? You turned out great.
Yeah.
Magic carpet ride.
Yeah. I wouldn't change it. Like I said, I would do it all over again if I could. Exactly the same way. Yeah. Worked with some wonderful people, met some wonderful people. I wouldn't change it. Not for the world.
You're the first guy that said that on this show. Usually you have somebody that says, I wish I could have said this, or I think I'd tell my younger self that. You're the first guy that gave that answer.
Right. Right. Thank you.
This has been fantastic. Stick around. We'll say goodbye off the air. I'm glad, like I said, I'm really glad that we got the technology straightened out and we were able to do our part 2 because this turned out fantastic.
Now I gotta go buy a new computer.
Well, that's the one drawback, but at least we have the tablet. If anything,
well, at least I know it's 10 years old this time.
All right, it had a good run. Any shout outs you want to give before I say goodbye to the audience?
It's my anniversary tomorrow.
Oh, happy anniversary!
Happy anniversary to my wife, and and my sons. Love them both, and my nephew's on the job, and all my family. Yeah, it's been a good ride.
I would say. Shout out to everybody that tuned in tonight. Thanks for being here. Coming up next on the Mike Dino Even podcast, he's in the chat and he'll be on the show this Friday. It's another volume of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, volume 29. Another guy that was in SOC in terms of being in the squad first. Then he went to a rescue, if I'm not mistaken. That's Garrett Lindgren. Been working to get Garrett on the show for a while, so it'll be good to speak with him. Of course, this Friday. Yeah, so Garrett, good man. And of course, to everybody that's in Florida, if you're tuning in from Florida tonight, please be safe with Hurricane Ian. Our best wishes to you. And on behalf of retired FDNY Lieutenant Bob Chuisano, I am Mike Colón. This has been another edition of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. And we will see you next time. Have a great rest of the night, everybody. I'll see you Friday. Take care.
Bye.